So okay, our final speaker is right here next to me, Patricia Tomasi. Patricia is the co-founder and executive director of the Canadian Perinatal Mental Health Collaborative. Inspired by her own struggles with perinatal mental illness, she's dedicated to transforming perinatal mental health care in Canada. Patricia has also created and edited You Are Not Alone, the country's first comprehensive perinatal mental health anthology. Before her advocacy work, she spent a decade in communications for the Ontario government and worked as a broadcast journalist and mental health worker. So I'll pass it over to you, Patricia.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Thank you to everyone who stayed for the last presentation. And now that you've had your donuts, you can just relax in your carb coma and we can talk about perinatal mental health. Yay! So, I'm going to tell you about how I was able to escape the corporate and government review system that I know so well, like many of you, and just unleash my own communication strategy and try to get perinatal mental health uh, onto the map, onto the federal agenda. So, the title From Barrie Moms on a Mission to the Office of the PM. I live in Barrie now. And when I co founded the Canadian Perinatal Mental Health Collaborative, I did so with a nurse, and her name is Jamie Charlebois, and we both lived in Barrie. And we were both kind of doing our own perinatal mental health advocacy work, her in the medical sphere, and myself. I was writing for, does anybody remember Huffington Post Canada, HuffPost Canada? RIP. So when it was still around and a lot of people had those blogs, after I went through pretty severe perinatal mental illness, I started just riffing about it on Facebook. And because my background is journalism and went to TMU for journalism, a lot of my friends were out there working in the field. And one of them was the editor of the HuffPost Canada blogs. And she said, you know what? We'd like to give you a blog to talk about this. Not many people are talking about perinatal mental health, which I'll define in a moment. Would you like to be open and share your story? And as a former journalist, I was so used to telling everybody else's stories. I never really shared mine that openly before. Facebook was, just with my family and friends, and even then, it was just little tidbits. But so I thought about it and I said, you know what? Um, I really, yes, I think I'll be okay with sharing my story because I really wanted to find out why it was so hard to navigate the healthcare system for help, which I never got the first time around. And so I thought maybe with this blog, I can find other people. I was looking for other people who had gone through what I'd gone through, looking for a support group, couldn't find one, but also maybe get to interview some doctors or mental health, or even if they existed, perinatal mental health psychiatrists, psychologists, specialists across Canada. I wanted to find them and learn more about it. And was my experience the same as others in trying to navigate the healthcare system? I didn't know. So I said, sure, I'll do that. And so I did that for a few years and got to interview, find those experts across the country, like at Women's College Hospital. The very first article I did, I interviewed Dr. Simone Vigaud, who's the head of psychiatry at Women's College Hospital. And I really learned from her that Canada didn't have a pathway for perinatal mental health care. And so my experience really wasn't unique. It was actually happening to a lot of moms, pregnant, postpartum moms, dads, partners. I had no idea this affected dads and partners. It can affect adoptive parents. It can affect people who've never even had kids, who experience something called tocophobia, the fear of childbirth. And there was a whole spectrum of perinatal mental illness, not just what you probably have heard of, which is postpartum depression. And so, fast forward. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was so excited about talking about perinatal mental health. I forgot that I wanted to also um, acknowledge that I work on the territory of the Anishinaabe, and that includes the Ojibwa, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy in Barrie. So I'd like to acknowledge that I have the privilege to work and play on these lands. And so fast forward about, oh my gosh, I think I started writing for HuffPost Canada in 2015. Fast forward to just this past April, I really shared my story in a way that I had never done before. Toronto Life reached out and asked me to share my story of postpartum psychosis in a 5,000 word story, which for journalists is like crazy because we have to pack everything in usually in like 600 to 800 words if we're lucky, or in broadcast, 1 minute, sometimes even 30 seconds. So that was a challenge, and to really open up. And so I did that. And I guess what I want to get across in my presentation today is that I so agree with the other two presentations here today, and even a lot of them from yesterday, that I know it's drilled into our heads in J school about it's the story, it's always the story, and lead with the story, and where's the human element? But it's so true. That is what makes a connection, at least worked in our case, to make that connection with the media, to get our message out, but also with government legislators. I found that, yes, we had the data to support all the stories of lived experience, but it wasn't the data that captured their attention. It was the stories, and the data supported it. So after writing for the HuffPost, I actually interviewed Jamie, and that's how I met her. And we found out we only lived a couple kilometers apart in Barrie, so it's kind of serendipitous. And we thought, we want to advocate for perinatal mental health care in Canada. We want to try and do something and change the system. So where are the advocates? Who can we join? And we couldn't find any. And so we quite naively decided to do it ourselves and and create a nonprofit. And we both had absolutely no experience in nonprofit running a business, but we knew that we needed to get our mission and vision out there. And so in 2019, we formed the CPMHC, and our mission was to improve and advance perinatal mental health care in Canada. And our vision is that all individuals and families are able to access the services they need to experience a mentally healthy perinatal period. Now, I have to say, this wasn't our mission and vision when we first started. In fact, we didn't incorporate until 2 years later. We were those two Barrie moms on a mission, and that's how the local media colloquially called us. And we just got together and said, okay, we want to make a change. What are we going to do? So I had my communications hat on. She had her medical hat on. And I said, well, we definitely need to mobilize. We need to get everybody together and unify our voices. So that's what we did. We went on social media and said, this is who we are. This is what we want to do. We know we definitely cannot do this alone. We need to build a movement. And so we asked the experts, clinicians, researchers to form a national committee under us, that we would meet with them monthly to find out what was the landscape of perinatal mental health care in Canada, what was everybody doing, how could we amplify their work. And we formed a social media ambassador committee. So we just put the call out on social media, and we said, if you are a person that has been through perinatal mental illness and you've had a hard time navigating the system, we are wanting to advocate for you, and would you want to help us spread this message? And so right away, it was also convenient in the sense that we believe it was an idea, what's that phrase, an idea whose time had come. The mental health movement was underway. We had a government federally in power. who was talking a lot about mental health. People were talking about mental health. Bell Let's Talk had been around for a while. And so we just came out there and said, hey, don't forget about perinatal mental health. Um, and our goal, so after we finally incorporated in 2021, we did the whole, strategic planning day and came up with our actual mission, vision, and goal. So our goal is that by 2032, federal, provincial, and territorial governments will have passed and implemented appropriately funded policies and legislation that are providing people timely access to perinatal mental health services. Oh my God, I'm not even going to finish reading that sentence. It's interesting how we went from a real grassroots to Barrie Moms on a Mission. We went out there on social media, we organically got everybody together, to then having to incorporate and then, have to use this long-winded verbiage, which has never been something that I've been a proponent of, but it's, in one sense, it's what shows that you're credible, by using this language in like your like strategic vision and whatnot. But that, I would never put that up on social media. Maybe I did once if you go through my feed and you see it, but like, what the hell does that mean? That's not the kind of communications outreach and campaigning that we do. And so these are just the reasons why we believe we need a perinatal mental health strategy. Something we did right out of the gate is that I said, okay, we can come out there with this name, which I kind of didn't like either, but I understood the point that, again, it needed to be credible, like Canadian Perinatal Mental Health Collaborative. Wanted to call it something like Moms for Mental Health, or something catchier, but that's a good name for a campaign necessarily, but maybe not for the organization. So I said, okay, but we need like focus. We need to do one ask and just champion that ask. And so we decided to go for like the biggest ask, which is asking the federal government to create a national perinatal mental health strategy. Now, this was at the time that they had agreed to implement or create a national autism strategy. So that was that thinking around there. Today, might have called it something different, but it really was just to put perinatal mental health care on the map federally, knowing that the rubber meets the road or hits the road provincially when it comes to healthcare. But we just wanted to amplify perinatal mental health across Canada, and we do believe the federal government can have a role to play in leading that discussion. So just quickly, what the heck is perinatal mental health? Perinatal mental health, as I kind of alluded to before, involves a spectrum of, or perinatal mental illness, I should say, is a spectrum of different mental health conditions that can happen to mom, dad, partner, anytime from preconception to 1 year postpartum, and we like to say, and beyond. And so that can include prenatal and postpartum depression, anxiety, panic disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, and psychosis. Psychosis is what I experienced. Although rare, it's 1 to 2 in 1,000 that might experience it. However, it's vastly underreported. What I experienced was hallucinations and delusions after the birth of my first. And lucky for me, I say lucky, they were very extremely positive manic delusions, and positive in the sense that I wasn't getting any kind of harmful messages that I wanted to harm myself or my child. I was getting messages and delusions about needing to save the world. I needed to save everybody. And I needed to go out and learn all these new age spirituality, which is great. If you're into new age, wonderful. But you know that line where you're like, "Oh, could this be real? I'm not sure." Well, I knew it was fundamentally real, and I was getting messages from angels and aliens. And yes, it used to be embarrassing for me to talk about it, but now I'm very happy to tell this story because I'm here today. I'm a lucky one, but there are many who aren't here. And so I'm not shy about telling my story, and we use a lot of people's stories to get our message out. And so these are just statistics. We did a survey of healthcare practitioners across Canada, and they found that 95% found that services for perinatal mental health are insufficient, and a lot more really impactful statistics. So again, we had the data, and in order to reach legislators, we did a bunch of different things. We pulled levers of government. We did an e-petition. We found our perinatal mental health champions just by cold calling and cold emailing MPs across Canada. And so in the beginning, when we came out in 2019, it was one of the federal elections, one of the many that we've had over the past several years. And so we decided to send a letter to all the party leaders introducing who we were, and will you support a national perinatal mental health strategy, a little bit about our stories. And we got a letter back right away from NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, a signed letter saying yes, they support a national strategy. The other parties, supported work for perinatal mental health, but they didn't clearly come out and said they supported a national strategy. But we took that and we blasted it on social media. And so everything that we did, it's this cycle that we've done of personal stories, the data, what is the ask, what is the political lever that we're trying to pull, the response, and blast it on social media. And so we've just been running this loop for the last 5 years over and over and over again. And it seemed to have worked because we were able in 2022 to meet with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in his office. And how that happened was that when we found out about a story, and this is the story of Flora Babakani, a Canadian mom who tragically lost her life due to undetected and untreated postpartum psychosis. And the only way we found out about that story was through word of mouth. It was actually someone that I knew from J School and university who knew her sister. And then she called me and told me the story and said her family would like to get the story out. And so within a couple months, we put together our very first Flora's Walk, which we run annually now, and that was in 2022. And we asked our community that we had already mobilized, and we told them about this story. And so we had 20 walks planned in a couple months across Canada. Some had 2 people, some had 20, some had 100. It didn't matter. The fact of the matter is that we were getting out, mobilizing, telling Flora's story, which is the most extreme version of perinatal mental illness, but as a way of showing that perinatal mental illness is here, we don't have adequate supports and resources, and you need to listen. And they did listen. They heard our story. And so we were invited right after Flora's Walk in Ottawa to go meet with the Prime Minister. And we had 20 minutes with him. And with us was the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Carolyn Bennett at the time, and MP Pam Demoff, one of our champions that took our call, listened to us, and decided to help us amplify our vision. And he listened to us and tweeted out and put it on social media that he promised to deliver timely access to perinatal mental health services, and it was on the mandate letter for the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. So a huge win that we celebrated, but we knew that for every win that you get, there's even more and more advocacy that you have to do, because do we have timely access to perinatal mental health services today, a few years later? No. We know it's going to take longer than that. But in 2023, at our Flores Walk Ottawa event, which we put together and invite members from all parties to come and speak at. At that point, our walks went from 20 to 40 walks across Canada. And again, we're just amplifying this across social media, tagging the politicians, tagging the media, really getting the word out. And so in 2023, behind the scenes, I did a lot of advocating for an announcement for perinatal mental health. We had developed relationships with the politicians, and so we did get an announcement in 2023 in Ottawa, and that was Minister of Mental Health and Addictions announcing funding from Health Canada to support the creation of Canada's first ever clinical perinatal mental health guidelines, which we were ecstatic about. We've been working on the last year and a half with Women's College Hospital, who took the lead on that project. We're principal authors on it. The guidelines will be coming out very shortly. We've also written a patient and family guide. So this is a huge, huge accomplishment, thanks to everyone across Canada coming together. And I'm telling you, don't mess with moms that have gone through this, because they turn into, and this is a term used in the US movement, warrior moms. We really do, because we just can't believe that there's no system set up in place for perinatal mental health. And so we pulled all those levers of government. Like I said, we've just been on this machine wash cycle of blasting everything on social media, pulling the levers, and using those personal stories. The personal stories are what have enabled us to amplify our message. And so here are some other personal stories that we've told. These are just some quotes from them. We ran a campaign called #ThisIsMyStory. And so we invited people to write, tell us your story, and then we would put it up on our social media feeds. And this is a picture of Flores Walk just this past year in May. May is World Maternal Mental Health Month. That's when we hold our walks. So the campaign starts in the fall. Our campaign for 2025 is starting on November 1st. Our announcement's going out. And so that's when people sign up to be a walk leader, start forming their teams, start filling out permits and that kind of thing. And people can start donating. And it goes all the way to May, which the first Wednesday in May is World Maternal Mental Health Day. The whole month is World Maternal Mental Health Month. So we went from 20 walks in 2022 to over 50 walks in 2024, and we're just growing. So here's some pictures from our walks across the country. And now I'd like to play you a short video and then take your questions. It's about Flora's story. This is just one example of how we shared Flora's story across social media, and also, we delivered this video to politicians and to media.
As far as I know, she was never prompted or assessed in any way in terms of her mental health. I believe that she was really struggling mentally before the pregnancy. And Flora was so happy. She was ecstatic. She was like showing us Amber, just telling us how amazing she felt, and she couldn't believe she had a healthy, beautiful baby girl. She was just like cloud nine, top of the world, just really, really happy. Her lifelong dream was always to have a baby. She called me 3 days later and she was still in the hospital and she was like hysterical, like absolutely hysterical, really upset, really angry. She definitely wasn't diagnosed. She definitely wasn't taking any medication. But Flora never really, she never really expressed at that time that she was feeling really upset in any way. The only indication that we had was that she was quite disconnected from the baby. They managed to speak to a doctor by Thursday, and the doctor said that they were going to give Flora a call on Monday. And then Flora passed away on the Friday. So it's so close to getting help. I remember saying those words, and she was like, "I promise everything's okay." And she was like, "I love you so much," and I was like, "I love you too." And that was the last I ever spoke to her. Yeah, I don't think there was a proper assessment of any kind. And I'm shocked as well because when she did call me from the hospital 3 days later and she was hysterical and surrounded by doctors and nurses, I just thought, well, everybody's assessing her physical health. Like, why aren't they checking on her mental health, you know?
Yeah.
That should be part of it. Flora would be so proud and happy to raise this awareness for other people, because she was that type of person as well, and she would love that you are doing this in her honor.
And so, unfortunately, it is still happening. And we only hear the stories through the grapevine. Renee Ferguson of Saskatchewan passed away in fall 2023. And we had a team there raising money for Flora's Walk. And the unique thing too about Flora's Walk is that we wanted it to belong to the community. That's another way of amplifying our message, is bringing the community and mobilizing and getting everyone together. So at the very beginning, we said this wasn't about CPMHC. This movement is never about CPMHC. It's about perinatal mental health. And so we actually give back 70% of what communities raise, and we give it back to the local communities to invest in their own perinatal mental health programming. And so it's really amazing now, as we're gearing up to announce Flora's Walk 2025, we're sharing posts of Flora's Walk funding and action and the support groups the free to low cost support groups happening across the country, and therapy because of Flora's walk. So Flora's legacy will live on, and we will continue this walk year after year. But we're still calling for timely access to perinatal mental health services. And so I'll end right there and take any questions about any of our communications tactics. And I will love advice as well as we continue forward. Thank you.
But first, thank you for sharing your story. Really appreciate hearing your lens, hearing your story. Are there any questions in the audience or online?
We do have one online. So, did you get a sense of what the lever was that forced the government to act? Was it a cumulative effort, or was there something more that you were able to suss out?
I think it was a culmination of us introducing ourselves to the government. The very first thing that we did was the e-petition in the House of Commons. So it was the very first time that MPs on the floor had ever heard of the Canadian Perinatal Mental Health Collaborative, and in many ways, maybe perinatal mental health itself. So we did that, and then we had meetings with MPs across the country. We then had another MP who was a great champion, who still is, MP Heather McPherson from Edmonton, Strathcona, again, who took our call and really resonated with our advocacy. And she did a few statements in the House, and one of them actually, she called for a motion for support of a national perinatal mental health strategy, which all the parties did support unanimously, but motions aren't binding, so that we had to keep going on and on. So it was just keeping it in their face, I guess, as much as we could, so that by the time the next federal election happened, and we had already developed and built relationships. We were there again. We did pre-budget submissions. When the new Minister of Mental Health and Addictions was announced, right away we were trying to get meetings with her and her staff. And again, we were fortunate that she also believed in this issue. And so it really was a collective effort, but always out there, sharing the story and trying to get in front of them and trying to get this attention.
Did you have a lot of help from the researchers as well?
Yes. There's so much there's not enough funding for research, but there is great research happening in perinatal mental health. And so we actually partnered with a lead investigator from Calgary and the University of Calgary. We received ethics approval, and that's when we did that survey with healthcare practitioners. And, then we amplified that in the media. So something that a lot of researchers, I think, need help with today too is getting their research out there and covered in the media. So I was helping them with that. And because the research language and a study, when you read it, wow. So academic language to the hilt, right? So it's about bringing in, again, those stories of lived experience and telling it in a way that the media will want to cover it. And so we got a lot of media coverage as well from work being done by researchers. And now we have a research arm that we never thought that we were going to have, where we're co-collaborators on a number of research projects.
And there's a question back there.
Seeing as you have a very large mandate and kind of overall goal, I was just wondering if there's something that, since you've started, that you've learned that you want to try in terms of tactics or a campaign in the coming year or two, that you're excited about trying something different.
Yeah, so I think everyone is putting a lot of thought into the current political landscape and how to effectively advocate as we, embark on this runway, which might be 2 weeks. 6 months or a year long into the next election. I think we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, and that's building those relationships with our elected officials. We are still advocating for a national strategy, though I think something that we're going to do differently is change the language from strategy to national standards of care, which to us is the same thing. It involves the same process. And that seems to be language and an action that the government supports and doesn't mind providing resources and funding to. The mental health standards just came out with their roadmap. I really tried to get perinatal mental health in there. It's not, unfortunately. I don't know why. But these clinical guidelines that are coming out, former Minister Bennett actually said this is a step towards national standards of care. So the fact that that is the language that they're using, I think communications wise, we're probably going to be veering towards using that language. But just keep mobile. We're going to keep mobilizing, keep amplifying, keep sharing stories. And even with, whether there's a change in government or not, the tactics are the same, except that we just make sure that we keep building those relationships with everyone, because this is an all-party issue to us, and that is really important. So we had Elizabeth May at our Flora's Walk speaking. We had representatives from almost every party. The Bloc couldn't make it that day, but they do support us as well. So I think that's really important too, is that don't make your issue a one-party issue, especially in healthcare. That should be a no-brainer. It's an all-party issue. So really get out there and build those relationships.
Putting my comms hat on, I'm just thinking, taking my hat of absorbing everything you said, is to lean into the partnerships. For example, I know we at HEROC we work closely with midwives, and they have also standards, and maybe that's something that by partnering with them, they can help amplify your point, your very important message. Even partnerships with Canadian Mental Health Association, etc. Because your messages resonates. I'm not a parent, but it resonates with me. So if it resonates with me, I'm sure there's other people like me and others who will be like, oh, why isn't there a standard? So that would be my thing. Like you asked for us any ideas, that would be something that like first thing that, and basically building on what everyone said that by the past 2 days is leaning into those partnerships, because they'll help you at the end of the day. They're not here to compete with you.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Thank you.
I think I saw a hand.
Yeah, question back here.
Hello. Thanks for sharing your story and for leading this important work. I had a question about the engagement with healthcare professionals. You said there was a survey to help inform this, which is super important. I just find that it sometimes can be really hard to get them to complete surveys and to participate in that. So did you have any creative strategies or tactics, or how did you get participation to help inform that?
Yeah, thank you for your question. By the time we launched the survey, we had developed our national committee of clinicians, researchers who were interested in this field. And so by the time that we did our survey, we had access to email listservs for doctors, obstetricians, midwives across the country. So it went out on those email listservs. And we also amplified it on social media. But I believe we got about 445 healthcare practitioners. Most of them were nurses. The nurses seem to be much more agreeable to filling out a survey than family doctors. We did get family doctors, however, and we most of the healthcare practitioners were actually in Ontario. So there were limitations with this study, and one of our goals is to reproduce it every 5 to 7 years and try to get a bigger sample size and more diverse sample size. But you're right, it is hard to engage, especially family doctors and obstetricians. So if you're hearing this and you're a family doctor, obstetrician, we really love for you I know you're so overworked and so busy, but to help us amplify perinatal mental health.
There's also a society called SOGCs.
Yes.
You can
They're
Obstetricians and Gynecologists Canada.
they're a great partner of ours. One other thing we did that I failed to mention was that when we send out a pre-budget submission, we actually got endorsements,
Oh,
as you said,
yeah.
from partners, and so the SOGC was one of them. Hospitals, mental health associations. So bringing that community
Amazing.
together really helps to amplify your message as well. And the SOGC, funny enough, are also coming out with guidelines for the very first time for perinatal mental health. I actually think they're out, if not now, but in a week or so. So we work closely with them as well.
Did they adopt what you were recommending?
Yes.
Okay,
So we were able to look at each other's, and they're very, similar and calling for the same things. And we were on each other's advisory boards.
Excellent.
So that really helps too.
Very good. I saw
Yeah.
another hand somewhere.
Yeah, question in the back here.
Thanks so much. I'd just like to say congratulations on establishing those guidelines. That's amazing. And thank you, just on behalf of, families like that, my own family, personal experiences, that those guidelines really would have come in handy at times. There's gems in the system. A lot of us know that. It's just a lot of gaps, as we know. So thank you for that. I think mental health in particular, the lived experiences are so key to driving a lot of these initiatives. Where I work at Sunnybrook, there's the Family Navigation Project you might have heard about, and very similar situation where people with lived experiences really drove that together with clinicians and others who supported it, and need organizations like ours supporting these initiatives. But I just find mental health in particular, the lived experiences is what, drives it and brings the voice out like no other. And there is traction being made. The Family Navigation Project is getting hugely successful. It is a different, area of mental health, of course, and probably easier, youth mental health as opposed to perinatal mental health. But it's nice to see that there is change happening, and thank you for doing that. So more of a comment than a question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Terrence, if there's a hand up here in the front.
So much. It's so heartbreaking to me that when Flora died, she was surrounded by healthcare providers and it was missed. And far from placing blame, I'm hearing that there's a lot of gaps. So I'm wondering if you have any insight into what is needed for those healthcare providers who are at the bedside, who might be in a position where, is it changes to standards? Is it the competencies? Or is it the research hasn't even come that far yet where we can be providing our healthcare providers with these tools? So basically, what do you think is needed for those who are working with patients who might be looking for those flags or who need to change their assessments?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think and we're going to be, embarking on a campaign to have healthcare providers understand the clinical guidelines that are coming out, because even though the guidelines come out, it doesn't mean everything changes the next day. We know that the healthcare system is overburdened and overworked, and healthcare practitioners might not even have the time to go through all the nuances of the guidelines. And so we're going to be having webinars and making sure that we answer any questions that any healthcare providers have. But the research is there. The clinical guidelines are based on the best randomized control trials that are out there. And so the recommendations stem from all the way from case identification to follow-up, and it covers perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, from things that we really don't hear about that often, which is OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, intrusive thoughts, how to make the difference between an intrusive thought, which requires urgent action, and an intrusive thought, which can be very common and scary, but it doesn't mean that the mom is going to harm herself or her child. So in the meantime, I guess I would just ask healthcare practitioners to just start a conversation and ask about someone's mental health. And there are evidence-based tools out there that they can use, such as the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, the PHQ, the GAD-7. I mean, there are different evidence-based tools that are out there, but they're not diagnostic tools. They're to help start this conversation. So have that conversation. There is a pathway that was developed in Ontario by the Provincial Council for Maternal and Mental Health. And so that pathway is available online, and that can, at the moment, can give healthcare practitioners a sense of what to do from mild to moderate to severe and where to refer. We need more places to refer. We need to reduce wait lists, but there is hope out there. There's also, and I'll just quickly say this too, that there's the largest talk psychotherapy trial, which is wrapping up soon, and the results will be out in March. It's called the Summit Trial, where nurses and midwives and doulas can be taught behavioral activation therapy in 6 to 8 sessions. And that has been shown to reduce postpartum anxiety and depressive symptoms. So there is work being done out there. There is hope. There is optimism. I want to leave you with a good feeling that we're working hard for perinatal mental health. It's just going to take some time as well to get the training embedded in medical schools as well, because from what we understand, there's almost no perinatal mental health training for family doctors. So we're working on it.
Well, there's definitely momentum. So, and to tie it back to of course, while we're all here at this comms conference, your communications is obviously working, and your socials and your partnerships and your advocacy, because if it wasn't, you wouldn't have the people around you who are around you to support and to get help amplify. So that in itself is a huge accomplishment, I would say. Even being here today and talking to us, and now some of us may go back to organizations and ask those questions, just like exactly what you said, to start the conversation, or to continue if it hopefully has already started at their organizations. So
and that would be the biggest.
Okay.
The biggest achievement from today would be fantastic. If you could all go back and have a conversation about perinatal mental health.
Definitely, we'll do. I promise to do that. And with that said, thank you so much, Patricia. We really appreciate your talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call Carly up on the stage. I don't know if she has a mic, Terrence. It's coming. Carly's going to go over a few